Good evening and welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. I have not had time to put together the intro like I normally would with a little bit of a countdown and all that 9 yards, but I did want to kind of start off with something specific here. So let's go ahead and switch over to that and we'll pick up from there. This is an interview between journalist Jason J. Smart and Ben Hodges, General Ben Hodges, talking about the situation with Russia. So let's go ahead and listen to about a minute of this.
So until we realize that they are at war with us, that doesn't mean kinetic necessarily. Russia's always at war. They use the full range of everything from threats, nuclear threats, to disinformation, to violations of international law, shipping, disrupting freedom of navigation, bypassing sanctions. Obviously, I'm sure you watched yesterday, 3 Ukrainian soldiers executed, video of that, every day attacking civilian targets. They don't care. And until we realize that, there's nothing that we do that provokes them except our weakness. And when we confront them with strength and determination, of course they'll complain, it's a violation and all this nonsense, but they don't do anything about it. So we've got to stop running scared. What a terrible signal we send to China, North Korea, Iran, when we stop and hesitate just because Russia mentions they might use a nuclear weapon. I mean,
That's the good fundamental lineup as to what the issue is with not facing Russia. By not facing Russia directly and with power and strength, we are effectively inviting them to continue everything they're doing. Because until they're put back in the box, they're going to keep on going. That's really great insight from General Hodges here. This whole interview is excellent. I'm going to go ahead and just link that right into the comments here so you guys can get onto it and see that at your leisure. But very excellent interview, very wide ranging, and I do appreciate that both General Hodges and Jason Smart put the time together to have this little visit. So let's go ahead and continue on with the other aspects of the news here. We're going to go on with the Institute for the Study of War's summary of the Russian offensive campaign assessment. They've got a lot of material in here. I'm going to quickly touch on the highlights and we'll talk about them as we go. By the way, Jerry and Lucille, glad to see you both. Glad to have you on board today. All right, so from the Institute for the Study of War, Russian state media highlighted Russia and China's joint effort to combat perceived Western dual containment, targeting Russia and China during Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's meetings with Chinese President Xi Jinping and Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing on April 19th or 9th. They are looking at the situation. China watched what Russia was doing. Initially, they wanted no part of it except to watch. And they have now seen that the West is acting weak. They're acting ineffective. They're not providing for the defense of Ukraine in a way that indicates a strong, solid, unified way of stopping Russia. And it's put them into a real thinking mode here. And the more they think about it, the more they realize that if we can't stop Russia, or if we refuse to stop Russia, because there's a difference there. If we refuse to stop Russia, the more likely it is that we will refuse to stop them if they enter Taiwan. So now Russia and China have got a common cause, and that is that they want to entertain their expansionist desires. U.S. Central Command announced on April 9th that it has transferred roughly a brigade's worth of small arms and ammunition seized from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to Ukraine on April 4th. This is a little bit of poetic justice in this regard because the Iranians have been transferring these small arms and ammunition to Houthi rebels and other forces that are intended to be used against U.S. forces. And we are taking those that we have seized and actually just sending them straight over to Ukraine. Very helpful for them, though this is all small arms. This is RPGs, AK-47s, which Ukraine already has a ton of, machine guns, sniper rifles, 500,000 rounds of appropriate ammunition. All useful, but none of them are major game changers in the war. A major game changer would be a huge stockpile of artillery shells, long-range missiles, fighter jets, the air defense missiles, all the things that they need in order to be able to save their country, save their citizenry, and be able to stop Russia in its tracks. The Ukrainian main military intelligence directorate is likely responsible for a drone strike against the Boryspil-Glebsk air base in Voronezh Oblast overnight on April 8th to 9th. This is a training base that trains, I believe, bomber and attack fighter aviation crews. And there's a facility on the base that was likely damaged. In fact, I have got some pictures of this here. Let's see if I can find it here. These are satellite images. Here's the before on the right and the after, where this horseshoe-shaped building, or actually G-shaped building, was significantly damaged by whatever happened here. You can see the burned off portion of the roof, and it may have even collapsed further than that. This indicates it was a significant impact by the drones that were used, and it looks like the overall situation is that Russia's going to have to deal with the loss of part of this facility. Now, they do call it a production facility in the other media that I've seen. It could be that they were using it to produce artillery, or not artillery, but air-to-ground munitions and things like that. It's not really been made clear by other sources. Russian mill bloggers continue to employ virulently anti-migrant rhetoric and calls for xenophobic domestic policies, but in doing so are exposing the inherent hypocrisy in Russia's treatment of its own indigenous ethnic minority communities. I don't think there's anybody who has claimed that there's been any less than hypocrisy coming from Russia at this point in time. Well, I should take that back. I know quite a few people who will say that there's been no hypocrisy. And that's what scares me. Because if you look at Russia and you say, well, let me see, they took Crimea, and nobody really did much of anything. And then they decided they were just going to march into Ukraine, the main part of Ukraine, and start taking over parts of the land, and expect that nobody's going to stop them there. But the people that I talk to don't see that when Russia said, no, we're not going to be marching into Ukraine, that's just crazy talk, we have no plans, that they were being hypocrites, that they were deliberately deciding to lie to the world. And they do this all the time. It's shocking how often the case that Russians would have would be so much better if they just tell the truth, and yet they lie anyway. The Kremlin will likely be able to leverage a new agreement signed by the Kremlin-affiliated governor of the pro-Russian Moldovan Autonomous Region of Gagauzia, Yevgenia Gusul, and a state-owned Russian bank to further its efforts to destabilize Moldovan society, attack Moldova's democratic government, and prevent Moldova's accession to the European Union. This is targeted information operations that is now going to a pre-kinetic state. It's one where this autonomous region is working on fully breaking away and becoming an asset of the Kremlin's. And this is a tough situation. I'll be talking about this further on a little bit later in the video today, but this is what Russia is doing. This is part of their plan. Their plan is not to just take a few little bits of territory and say, oh yeah, that's right, we just protected our Russian-speaking population here. No. They want it all. Now, right now, they've probably got a tentative gentleman's agreement with China. They were probably looking at dividing spheres of influence. Does this sound familiar? This is right back into the Cold War. The difference is that this time the two people dividing the influence are on the same side, China and Russia. Though, to be fair, the truth is that China and Russia's actual aims do not actually coincide. They just happen to be able to use each other to forward their aims. Russia is reportedly considering creating a new ministry for youth policy and patriotic education, likely as part of an ongoing attempt to instill pro-Kremlin and Kremlin-approved ideology in Russia's next generation. Self-explanatory, nothing further needs to be said. Moving on to the last item in here that's the major takeaways here. Russian military authorities in Armenia detained another Russian citizen in Armenia, likely in an effort to assert military and political power over Armenia and to challenge Armenia's sovereignty amid a continued deterioration of Armenian-Russian relations. Again, they're putting the pressure with information operations and, in some ways, effective actions to actually create stress fractures in the nations that are not directly in their sphere. Armenia was in Russia's sphere for a long time, and yet when they saw that Russia really had no intentions of protecting them, they came to the West instead. Now the Russians are undermining the Armenian government in any way they can, with the intention being to create a puppet situation there, potentially even draw it into the Russian fold entirely. Already talked about the Russian drones attacking the aviation training center here. There's a lot of information on this that's come out since then. With this being about 330 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, seems kind of strange to me that Russia has not moved some of their training and other production facilities farther from the front, which would seem to be a wise decision on their part if they were, but that doesn't mean they're going to. I wanted to get a little bit of time to kind of go through this opinion piece and give you a good summary of what's going on here. I did not have time today to do so. It's a great read, though, so I'm going to go ahead and just post the link to it here, where he talks about the situation with the seizing of Russian funds and the Russian frozen assets, I should say, and using them to assist Ukraine. So a lot of good stuff, and I think that you'll probably enjoy it if you go through it. Moving on to something I did have enough time to get through here. There was an interview between President Zelensky and Germany's Bild newspaper, and he talked about a lot of different aspects. He does mention that Ukraine has some counteroffensive plans. Yes, he said Russia has more people, more weapons, but the United West has modern weapons systems. He was suggesting that the Western systems are key to Ukrainian victory. And to be honest, there's some real truth to that. This is effectively asymmetrical warfare on their part, where they can't bring the volume of bodies and the volume of equipment to the front, but they can bring better equipment and better training, and thus be able to counter Russia's one major advantage. They have put together counteroffensive plans, but that also requires weapons, he said, also from the United States. He did say he does not intend to negotiate with Vladimir Putin nor reward the Kremlin with any parts of Ukraine. He said, "We are dealing with Putin here. Everything he has said so far, after that he acted differently. We can't trust him." That's something we just addressed a few minutes ago. Zelensky did not look favorably on the idea of freezing the war at this place. And the problem is that if you look at this, like when Russia went into Crimea, they froze the conflict up until all of a sudden they didn't want the conflict frozen anymore. And therefore, it's clear that it doesn't make any difference if the Ukrainians and the Russians freeze the conflict for now. They will, the Russians, that is, will come back stronger. He did invite Donald Trump to visit Ukraine with his alleged plans to end the war, but the real long story short on President Trump's plans to end the war was basically deny Ukraine weapons and make them die on the vine, basically turn them over to Russia. There is indications that Russia is working on a big offensive in Kharkiv, and that has been ongoing. The idea, though, is to flatten the city with anything they can. In fact, Russia has been building Fab 1500 and Fab 3000 bombs. That's 1500 kilogram and 3000 kilogram explosive ordnance that's designed for leveling huge swaths of land. They've been deploying at least some of these over in Kharkiv as they start to aggressively bomb the city. He said Kharkiv is one of Ukraine's capitals, so it carries great symbolic importance. But they will do everything in their power to stop Russia from taking the city. We are taking every possible measure, he said, to prevent this from occurring. He believes that Shultz's continuing efforts to deny Ukraine Taurus missiles are because Shultz recognizes that Germany is not a nuclear power and Taurus is their best weapon. They don't have any bigger option. The problem is we worked hard to try and get some countries to step away from the nuclear ambitions. By not supporting countries now, those countries have no reason not to get nuclear weapons. South Africa managed to they built the nuclear weapons without anybody knowing. And then all of a sudden one day they announced, okay, we've now dismantled all our nuclear weapons and we don't have them anymore. And everybody was like, oh, whoa, we didn't even know that was going on. But Iran wants them. North Korea wants them and potentially has precursors of them. Pakistan has them. India has them. Israel is rumored to have them and believed to have them. France, the United Kingdom, the U.S., and obviously Russia. China is also believed to have them. Nuclear weapons are unfortunately part of the equation now. And if we, the United States, do not back up a country that has willingly given up their nuclear weapons, like Ukraine has, then no other nation will give them up. Nobody will take the risk. And he talked about the future of Ukraine without U.S. aid, saying that defeat then becomes possible. And he said Vladimir Putin will destroy everything. He will kill a lot of people. Most people will not escape, he said, so he will kill many of them. What will it look like? There will be a lot of blood. There will be many casualties and many losses. We are talking about hundreds of thousands. Moving on, he was also had an interview with Politico. He said, of course, he was talking about being ready to listen to Trump's proposals for ending the war, but that they were pretty much, if it's just give up our territories, that's a very primitive idea, he said. However, kudos to Zelensky. He did say he spoke respectfully of President Trump as a leader, and he wants to build a constructive partnership with him. And stressed that Ukraine needs the assistance of its partners and cannot allow the war to enter a phase of freezing. The news out of Ukraine real quick. Hang on a second. I got to mute a radio here. Sorry about that. From U.S. General Christopher Cavoli, the top U.S. commander in Europe, in comments to Congress on April 10th, Ukraine will run out of ammunition and air defense interceptor missiles in fairly short order without further support from the United States. And if they run out of air defense missiles, there will be nothing stopping Russia from leveling the entire nation. A Russian missile attack in Odessa killed 4, including a 10-year-old girl. This was reported to have hit an infrastructure object of some kind, though they were not exactly clear on what that was. Overall, in the month of March, 604 Ukrainian civilians were killed or injured a 20% increase from the previous month, according to UN's Human Rights Monitoring Mission. Here's that it says it was an infrastructure facility in Odessa with damaged its administrative and technical buildings. Here's some pictures that were turned up here. This has actually got a little bit of information on it. It's got the energy and public transport infrastructure in Odessa, including 2 public transport company employees. They attacked an energy facility in Mykolaiv, which is what was pictured here, and caused emergency power outages. One of the things they keep bumping into is Russia is using more of their hypersonic ballistic missiles, and these give them very little time to be able to respond, to announce an alarm and be able to get people into cover and marshal their air defense systems. So they have done something very unusual. They have actually asked Crimeans to track down and report back the locations of the Bastion missile launchers, the ones that launch the hypersonic ballistic missiles. So these missiles, of course, can impact locations in Ukraine in short minutes, not a long time in advance. They don't get a whole lot of advance notice at all. And they're being based in Crimea because Crimea gives them a much shorter shoot than they would from anywhere else. So they're asking Crimeans, do you live in Crimea or do you have friends or relatives on the peninsula? If you do, share this message with them. The message includes photographs of this system and highlights its use in launching the Zircons against Ukrainian cities. They also provide guidance on how to report the information anonymously through the Evorog chatbot and how to protect oneself both while posting any information and by deleting any links at all communication with others afterwards. So this talks about the information they need: deployed system locations, system parking and layup areas, storage areas for missiles, refueling locations, and any personnel that might be related to the Zircon missile launchers. Ukraine's postal service has issued stamps on the anniversary of the destruction of the cruiser Moskva. If there's one thing I will say for Ukrainian postal employees, they certainly have a sense of humor. They depict the Ukrainian-made weapons, Shark unmanned systems, one of the largest FPV drones Squadron, self-propelled gun Bogdana, and armored vehicle Kozak, and naval drone Magura V5. These stamps will go on sale April 13th. I'll also give them that they're really pretty stamps. I want to talk about this one for a minute or two because it kind of made the rounds and I didn't have good backup information on it at the time. There was a video that's been going around, as they say, in Russian Telegram channels that shows an Iskander strike on a weapons depot. However, while it depicts some artillery systems here, these have been stationary by and large since 2017, which means these are not current or usable equipment in this regard. Now, some indications are that there was some work taking place, maybe a modernization program trying to bring them into the war or something along those lines. They may also have been using them as parts for other vehicles. But this Ukrainian depot went up, was taken out with an Iskander strike. But by and large, the vehicles there haven't moved in well over 5 years. So that's the situation on this one. There is some reduction. You can see here that the number of vehicles in here is reduced. But again, that would indicate that what's left there was not operational at the time. Ukrainian forces have now launched a new long-range fixed-wing munition, officially named the Ram-X, but they actually dub it the Ukro-Lancet. This is an analog or close copy of the Russian Lancet drone, and in this case, it shot and hit a Russian 9A317 Buk system. Let's go ahead and move on to the news out of Russia itself. Let's see. Yes, this is from Deputy Department of Defense Assistant Secretary Celeste Wallander. She says, Russia shows no signs of stopping, this is from General Cavoli. Russia shows no signs of stopping, nor does Russia intend to stop with Ukraine. Russia presents a chronic threat. I can't predict the future, but I can do simple math, Cavoli said. If we do not continue to support Ukraine, Ukraine will run out of artillery shells and will run out of air defense interceptors in short order. Based on my experience in 37 plus years in the military, if one side can shoot and the other side can't shoot back, the side that can't shoot back loses. I don't need 37 years of military experience to recognize that factoid. However, I will absolutely recognize the authority behind this particular statement. From the Defense Intelligence Update from the UK, Russia continues to conscript soldiers each spring and autumn, with the spring one being around 150,000 soldiers. Now, they are supposed to serve for 12 months, but during that time, they're pressured to sign a contract and thus become a much higher paid contract soldier that's sent to Ukraine. The idea, though, is that even though these soldiers are not sent to the front lines in Ukraine, they can be put places like in Russia, on the borders with Russia and with Ukraine, and therefore could end up being in direct combat as Ukraine and Russia clash at various points in time. They do want to recruit around 400,000 contract service personnel in 2024 to sustain their forces in Ukraine. Then there's this one. If you have followed the political situation in the United States for any length of time, you're probably already familiar with Burisma Holdings Limited. This is an energy company that was noteworthy for their hiring of Hunter Biden, President Biden's son. That was some time ago now, and Russia says they're now investigating Burisma for its potential links to the Crocus City Music Hall attack. However, there is a problem, and I've researched this several ways, but this is the easiest way to do it here. Here is your friend and mine, Wikipedia. Burisma was dissolved in 2023. There is no corporate entity by the name of Burisma Holdings Limited. Therefore, they're looking to try and investigate something that effectively at this point does not exist. So Russia's still trying to set up the thing is, this is brilliant in many different ways from Russia's side. They're tagging onto something that is well known in the U.S. political sphere. It's partisan just when you mention the name. And on top of that, there's nobody that can deny it because the company doesn't exist anymore. So from Russia's perspective, the Western world, by and large, still believes Burisma is an attacked entity, one that still exists, but it isn't. And therefore, it's great disinformation from Russia's side. The overall plan, though, is to blame the Ukrainian SBU chief Maliuk of orchestrating the attack on the Crocus City Hall. This is despite the fact that ISIS-K, I believe it is, has taken credit for it, has provided body cam footage of the attack, and has indicated they have every intention of carrying out further attacks against Russia. Now, here's where things get a little bit murky as well. The Russian Defense Ministry has said a Mi-24 helicopter has crashed off of Crimea. There was the reports are that there was an explosion on board, which indicates it was not just a technical issue with the aircraft, that something else may have happened. But there's a lot of aspects to this. For instance, Ukraine says a Ka-27 fell into the sea after an explosion on board. Now, either way, either one or two helicopters has hit the water. We don't know for sure which one it is. We do know an explosion was on board at least one of them, and that it was either a Mi-24 or Ka-27. But what we don't know for sure is which one and how. So overall, it's interesting to watch. I don't know that we'll get a bit more clarification on this. My best estimate at this point is that one helicopter was downed through some kind of explosion on board, and it's likely, at this point to be a Mi-24. But I do not have further information on it. Just watch out for that if you're watching various other sources. Russian state television has been a vocal opponent in painting Western democracies as the root of all problems. Yet, the desire for U.S.-made products inside Russia remains very high, with the country's providers turning to illegal schemes to cover the demand. In this case, they're talking about Western movies, where they have redubbed Western movies to Russian and provided it for their domestic audience. So, the more they scream about how much they hate the West, the more they want Western products. I believe this is a separate attack. A drone attack was reported on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant's training center, which is adjacent to the site. Of course, Russia's going to blame Ukraine. Ukraine's going to blame Russia. At this point, I don't see any reason why Ukraine would attack this plant directly. It's a bad idea for them because it's their property that's going to get up in smoke if they do. But Russia has no vested interest in this plant at this point, and I don't think they believe they're going to be able to hold it. And that's why I think they're working on provocations over there. In what would definitely be what you could call a crappy job, Ukrainian hackers launched cyber attacks on Moscow's sewage system, and they shut off 87,000 sensors and prevented the utility company from responding to accidents and emergency events. Well, let me tell you, when you have sewage backing up into your house or your business, it is not a fun day. And that is what the Ukrainian hackers have managed to pull off in Moscow. Now, considering all the flooding over there, they might want to be watching their systems pretty darn close now. Speaking of flooding, here is the the city of Orsk. They've got some satellite images. Let me get this a little bit larger for you. Satellite images of the flooding that's going on in the town. This is extensive flooding. And this is due to the breach and destruction of 3 different dams due to basically dumping more water in than those reservoirs can handle, combined with an extensive amount of corruption that meant that the dams were poorly built. Now, I believe I mentioned this yesterday, but the construction company has blamed rodents or mice for the destruction of the dam. Russia is having more trouble keeping their cities safe and have now started to deploy Pantsir S-1 missile defense systems to the city of Tula. Now, Tula has been a major production hub for Russia for decades upon decades. This is where a lot of their weapons came out of during the World War II era and before that. So it's clear that this is a vital city from Russia's perspective, and they're going to have to put some extra systems in to keep it protected. You may be familiar with Russian opposition leader Igor Strokov, mainly from his role in the downing of the MH17 airliner. However, he has been a vocal opponent to Vladimir Putin, though don't take that for more than it's worth, because he's basically said that Vladimir Putin isn't brutal enough towards Ukrainians. He has been sentenced to 4 years for extremist activities in Russia. However, he is reportedly working on a deal to send him to the front lines of the Donetsk People's Republic and become a unit leader or platoon commander over there and fight in the war against Ukraine. Talking about the flooding one more time, the water level in the Ural River near Orenburg exceeded the critical mark by almost 50 centimeters. That's with 300 houses that were flooded overnight. And this is well above the critical mark for the city. And the water level continues to rise from everything I have seen. Hydrologists do predict a further increase in the water level in Orenburg by 30 to 70 centimeters in the next 24 hours. So that is quite the increase, and it's going to continue in that vein for quite some time. So we've noted that a lot of the Black Sea fleet has ended up in port in Novorossiysk. This has been an ongoing issue for them. In fact, they've basically abandoned the port of Sevastopol and have moved all their ships out, and their ships really haven't gone to sea much. However, that hasn't stopped Russia from deploying submarines. Looks like it's for the purpose of being able to use their launch vehicles at sea, but with no danger of being detected and destroyed by Ukrainian drones or anything else. Don't believe Ukraine is running aviation out into the Black Sea to speak of. That would be extremely dangerous for them, easy to detect and easy to counter. However, this whole situation with the using submarines instead just indicates how restricted Russia's capabilities are in the Black Sea now. An attack on an airfield in Yeysk on April 5th damaged the Russian BE-200 aircraft, with the satellite image showing missing parts of the aircraft's left wing, as well as traces of fuel on the plates. There was an attack on the Serpukov, which was about to be transferred to the Black Sea. But even though this satellite image is here, it's hazy that day, so there's not a lot that you're able to see. But they do see the deployment of a large crane to the side of the Serpukov. Serpukov is one of the warships of the Russian military that had a fire that was started inside the ship itself and destroyed much of the internals of the ship. It's expected the ship will be out of service for months, if not years. Friendly fire incidents have been increasing, shall we say. This is a list of all of them over the recent war here. Now the incident with the Mi-24, it was an explosion on board. It's also been reported as a friendly fire incident. So we're seeing a lot of this going on, and boy, does it indicate that Russia's integrated friend or foe identification stuff is not working well. The residents of Russian Orsk, who are currently in floodwaters, are starting to talk about maybe they don't want to be part of Russia anymore. Because clearly, when Crimea was brought into the fold here, they were given so many resources, but the people in Orsk get none. They've got bad dams, they've got floodwaters, and just really, it's starting to get a little bit heated over there. Russia has seized the agricultural holdings of Agroterra, which was in Russia, and with those assets seized, they'll now be nationalized and likely given to some of Vladimir Putin's buddies. But this also means that they've lost the 24 farms, arable land, the elevators, and the capacity for 500,000 tons, and this was one of the largest 20 agribusiness groups in Russia. Once again, if they can't have it, they're going to seize it. And Rheinmetall is going to transfer an additional 20 Marder 1A3 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. And this is a nice addition for Ukraine's defensive capabilities. I don't know why I put this here. I think that was a mistake. I should have been with the Ukraine section, but I'll take it when I can get it. Let's go ahead and move on to the international front. And I'm kind of putting things out here pretty fast here, but in fact, let me take a brief pause here to get a drink of water. So bear with me just a moment. I'm going to switch things over. All right, let's go ahead and move on with the international front. And while I'm going from here, we'll be getting into front lines and a few other things in a bit here. If you have any questions or comments, absolutely pipe up. Let me know if you've got anything you would like me to kind of quickly research and see if we can get an answer for you. NATO Chief Stoltenberg sides with Ukraine against the United States and saying that Kiev has the right to determine legitimate targets in defending itself against Russia's illegal aggression. Let me unpack this slightly. Ukraine has been targeting Russian oil refineries, the places that make gas and lubricants for their vehicles. And the more they've done, the more Russia's had to pull back from exporting some of their refined products, and have had to restrict the access to their refined products inside the country itself. They've even had to ask Belarus and Kazakhstan for fuel and refined products to fill the gap. Of course, in the U.S., certain administration officials have said this rise in gas prices is bad for re-election, so please stop doing that, Ukraine. This is not a legitimate target. That is civilian infrastructure. You mean like the civilian infrastructure that Russia's been destroying day in, day out in Ukraine? So, no, fuel and oil products are, in fact, military targets because that is how they keep their aircraft in the air and they keep their tanks moving forward. It's also what we did in World War II, destroyed their oil facilities and oil storage. The UK has concluded its largest trade mission to Ukraine to date, which is a significant defense partnership to help Ukraine push back Russian aggression. We've got this little graphic here. It's only got a few seconds to go on, so I'll let that finish up. The Nordic and Baltic nations have been calling on NATO to increase their support for Ukraine. This is including aiding Ukraine in its fight against Russia and in Ukraine's bid to join the European Union. They want to move this forward because they all recognize that if Ukraine falls, they're next. Switzerland has confirmed it will host a peace summit in June. That's going to be working on apparently it's going to be working on the Ukrainian plan or Zelensky plan for peace. And overall, that's kind of where it's going to move forward from. Even Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has said in an address to Parliament on April 10th that the European Union needs to increase its defense spending in the face of the threat from Russia. Spain's economy, he says, is the fourth biggest in the European Union, and its army is the fourth largest, so its defense spending should more accurately match those standings. They're recognizing the situation, and they realize that they're going to have to get serious about defending themselves. Switzerland is planning to budget $5.5 billion to help Ukraine's economic recovery over the next 12 years. Kind of more important to get them defended first and get the economic recovery after, but, all to the good. Almost 3/4 of Germany's arms exports in 2024 are intended for Ukraine. And that is including a new batch of military aid to Ukraine with 6,000 155mm artillery shells, which by my estimate should last about 3 days, 1 million small arms rounds, drones, and armored vehicles, among other supplies. The European Union Ambassador Josep Borrell, I believe, should change that here. Josep Borrell speaks about this later, I believe. But in this case, it's the EU ambassador to Moldova, Yanis Mazics, has told reporters that the European Union is going to provide lethal aid to Moldova. And this is because they've got that breakaway region that's been working on adding itself to the Transnistria situation. This whole situation over there in Moldova is becoming very, very hot. And I am continuing to be very concerned about what's going on over there, because if Moldova falls apart on Ukraine's western border, it's going to be chaos over there, and that'll be a distraction, and they'll have to disrupt their other logistics to make sure that nothing bad happens on that border. It's not a pretty situation. According to the Wall Street Journal, U.S. made small drones are performing poorly in Ukraine as they have not been. I kind of read the article through. They are not very suitable against electronic warfare environments. They don't carry the advertised loads. They don't have the advertised battery life, and they're expensive compared to other alternatives. Now, according to the report, those drones were designed to military specification at the time, and they were not designed with an electronic warfare situation in mind. That was not part of the spec. So they're looking at drones that are not suitable to purpose because they did not properly anticipate the battlefield situation in the modern era. The European Union is preparing its 14th sanctions package against Russia and expect to adopt it this spring. However, I did see a bit where a couple of Russian oligarchs managed to get off the European sanctions list, as the report was that the court found that there was not enough evidence presented that their efforts were being used to go towards attacking Ukraine. The United States announced a $138 million sale to bolster Ukraine's Hawk air defense system. The Hawk's an older system, and they're already are looking at, that's not even in use in the U.S. military at this point, as I understand. But they're looking at providing some essential repairs and additional spare parts and missiles for the Hawk systems that are already there. Russia continues to try and push buttons. In fact, to the point where Sweden intercepted a Russian recon aircraft, an Il-20, that was near the Swedish coast and directed it away from Swedish airspace. From European Union Ambassador Josep Borrell, a wider war in Europe no longer a fantasy. The European Union needs more funds to prepare for a potential full-scale conflict, as the risk of war in Europe beyond Ukraine is no longer a fantasy. This is a real troubling situation for Europe. They've been looking at effectively unbroken peace for a long time, and now they're really realizing that they've had a festering enemy just waiting for the right moment to strike on their eastern border. Some of these things I'm skipping past because I already talked about them in other moments here. So, Ukraine will receive a loan from the United States for the purchase of 40 diesel locomotives. The U.S. State Export-Import Bank will give Ukraine a loan for the purchase of 40 railway diesel locomotives from American manufacturers. As the Ukrinform agency reports, the head of the board of Ukrzalizalentsia company Yevgeny Lyashchenko said at a press conference on Wednesday that the company signed a loan agreement for $156 million for 15 years. This will allow them to buy 40 diesel locomotives from private American companies. Now, understand this from Ukraine's perspective, this is awesome because I believe much of their existing railway infrastructure has been run on electric, not diesel engines. So by using these diesel locomotives instead, they can still move their trains and equipment around the country as they need to on their railways. The discharge petition that is intended to force Speaker Mike Johnson to bring the Ukraine aid bill to the floor and have a vote has gained 2 more signers to it. My understanding is there's about 23-ish to go that haven't signed on board. And therefore, if you're interested in that, you probably ought to be calling your elected representatives in Washington. And finally, from journalist Jason J. Smart on the international front, if Moldova reacts to the declaration of independence by Gagauzia, which is one of their breakaway regions now, by military means, the autonomy will appeal to everyone, including Russia. So Russia is going to be preparing its move into Moldova proper. And as he said, weakness from the West provokes Putin. Seems to be a theme we're seeing a lot of lately. Let's go ahead and move on to the front lines. And there was a lot of stuff going on in the last 24 hours. Let's go ahead and get into this here. The enemy captured Pervomaisk. Pull this out a little bit here. This is Avdiivka over on the right. Here's Pervomaisk. And it does look like, according to this, that they have captured this central area of the village itself. They advanced south of Novokalnyanove. Man, I am butchering the pronunciations today, so I apologize for that. You can see here it's just moving into some more of the kind of one of these tree lines as well. East of Yamansk, this is another area near Avdiivka here, again into open territory. And south of Novomihalaivka. Again, they're taking the areas that they can, the low-hanging fruit that allows them to see what they need to move forward a bit here. So a lot of this is not going to make major differences immediately, but it could allow them to flank or otherwise surround other forces. Active fighting continues near Vyimka, Krasnorivka, Vodyan, and Robotna. However, Ukraine is denying that Russia has gained a foothold in Robotna itself. The Ukrainians are reporting that Russia continues to push into the area, then get their forces destroyed, and then get pushed right back out. So we'll be watching that area closely. This may change in the next 24 to 48 hours. The FPV drone groups on the Russian side reports that they had an accident, they said. They were making drones in their workshop when one of them had a hand grenade explode, with the resulting damage being pretty extensive to this little shop. However, there was we talked about the Russians apparently having all of Pervomaisk. However, Null reports that there are still Ukrainian fighting in the center of the village itself. The Russians continue to push towards Chasiv Yar, with a new attack being repelled and leading to significant losses for Russia. They do simultaneously work on advancing west of Ivanivske, which is close to Chasiv Yar as well. They want to enclose Chasiv Yar from two sides and cut off the area east of the Donbass Canal. Additional indications that another repulsed attack south and east of Krasnohorivka, but the Russians have managed to gain some new positions in the southern part of the village near the railway line anyway. A lot of heavy fighting there. And finally, north of Pervomaisk, and taking advantage of the situation there, the Russians have advanced west of Tonenke. There's not much area left until Russia reaches the Karlovsky Reservoir and Volchcha River. Those would be natural barriers that they would then have to cross. Hi, Ozzy. Glad to see you on board. We just finished with the front lines, but always glad to see you here. A lot of information. If you at the end of this, you want to go back, it'd be a good idea, because we've gotten the bulk of things done. And I did notice something here, and I want to just kind of go into before we move to the interesting extras, and that is the situation with Iran and Israel. In this case, I'm just going to go through the Institute for the Study of War material on this. It's clear to me, at least, that the more that Russia has not been pushed back, other regimes are seeing that as a sign of weakness of the West, and they're taking advantage of it. In fact, the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy commander has implicitly threatened the United Arab Emirates during an interview with Lebanese Hezbollah-controlled media on April 9th, hoping to pressure UAE into severing ties with Israel. They've had some pretty good relationship with Israel lately, and Iran wants to isolate them as much as they can. Tangsiri separately endorsed the strategy of strategic patience in response to the April 1st airstrike that killed 7 IRGC officials in Damascus. This is basically a long-standing Iranian regime policy that involves not immediately conducting a major response to Israeli attacks, where they're basically try and wait for Israel to let their guard down a little bit and then hit them when they least expect it. U.S., Israeli, and Iranian officials told the New York Times that Iran is operating a smuggling network through Jordan to arm Palestinian fighters in the West Bank. This indicates that they're continuing to foment unrest in the area. And the Iranian effort to build its capabilities and networks in the West Bank is part of a larger effort to encircle Israel militarily, surround them, and then conquer them. That's their plan, at least. There was indications that the foreign minister from Iran had some calls with the foreign ministers of Iraq, KSA, and UAE. And this is amid reports that there is an Iranian retaliation to Israel imminent. So we're going to be watching this area as well. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because the focus at least for these videos, is Ukraine. But I want to touch on it once in a while, as I feel like the two incidents, the two situations intersect at times. Let's go ahead and move on to the interesting extras here. The Russians just love to claim that they are the defender of Christianity at this point in time as one of their big talking points. That has managed to get into the, shall we say, the political sphere in the United States. However, if you look at the history of it, Russia tends to suppress evangelical Christians quite aggressively. And if they don't toe the line, they don't get to be there anymore in various different ways. The overall situation, though, remains that Russia has been killing Ukrainian priests. They've been destroying Ukrainian religious facilities, and it's like the facts are being turned on their head. That's how Russian disinformation works. Many parties can arrive independently, according to Garry Kasparov, at the same truth, but not at the same lie. As with MAGA, Musk, and all of them now repeating the same Ukraine falsehoods is an op, not a coincidence, meaning that this is information that's being deliberately planted into those spheres and being germinated and then aggressively promoted in those spheres to make it so they believe these things that are not true. Here's a pretty cool little bit of kit here. This is a new Ukrainian-produced armored vehicle, the Ingvar 3, and looks pretty good. I mean, I could see this on the roads of the United States as a Hummer alike. But they do drive it on roads that I would actually do traverse in my passenger car. So this is not a major test of its capabilities, and at least not in this video here. But doggone it, that is a good-looking armored vehicle. How about a little low-flying Ukrainian aviation here? This is a Mi-24 Hind E gunship that's following a motorway at low level, just above those trees. Can't be more than about 150 feet in the air, tops. But look at them go. These guys know how to fly these choppers. A little bit of a interesting. I like to hit the uplifting things every once in a while, just to show that not everything is horrible and things like that. This is Mykola Kochiba from Kryvyi Rih. He's 87 years old and blind. However, he spends most of his time making camouflage nets for the front lines. Could you imagine? He knows exactly what he's doing. He's even talking about how it being 5 meters long when it unravels. The whole thing is about precision operation, and the guy can't see. This is dedication. Don't need to say anything about this one. It's just cute puppies. And I like some cute puppies. And that's everything for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm glad you were here, and I appreciate you being here. If you have at least enjoyed the puppies here, absolutely hit me with that old thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new here, but I don't think there's any new ones right now. And more importantly, if you feel that this is good information, absolutely share it with somebody who might be having some trouble with some of that disinformation out there. I do want to give a shout out while I'm at it. If you want to know somebody who can cut through that disinformation like none other, you ought to be following Ryan Macbeth. The man has got skills. He is good at what he does. And I absolutely appreciate the material he puts out. Wish I had the time and the skills that he does in order to do that. So absolutely check him out if you get the opportunity. I don't think I have his YouTube channel just available here. I'll quickly see if I can pop it up here. Oh yeah, this is it. This is it. Pop that up there. If you, while he doesn't cover all of the news or the that type of thing, if there's an item of disinformation and he catches wind of it, he is like a bulldog, and he will chase it down and talk about why it's wrong and how it's literally talk about how it's floated into the information sphere. Absolutely great information that he puts out, and I appreciate his efforts immensely. Extremely capable man, and I appreciate his material. And that's everything. So thank you again, Lucille, Jerry, and Ozzy. Always glad to have the three of you here, and looking forward to seeing more people joining us. Is this time of day a good time for you? Let me know in the comments after the stream ends. You have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on the next one.